Thank you for joining us today for the virtual Sunday service with the Center for Creative Living. CCL, a charter of the Universal Church of the Master, has served and supported the spiritual needs of its community here in the Bay Area for over 20 years.
Good morning. I'm so glad you decided to join us this morning for Center for Creative Living. I'm Reverend Doti Boon, and I'm so excited with the news I just received. I got a call from our wonderful Reverend Ronnie Grigsby, and he said he spoke to Kevin, and he said that Kevin was able to say, "I love you," on the phone to him back. Yay! So for all of you who had him in your prayers are being answered. Kevin is coming back to us. We don't know when he'll be able to go home. The doctor right now has said it'll be at least 2 more weeks. But we know he's healing, he's talking, and he's hearing our wonderful Reverend Ronnie. So thank you all so much for your prayers. Well, if this is the first time you've tuned in, the Center for Creative Living is a very unique church. We accept people of all stages in their life and whatever faith, whatever religion they were born into. Whoever you are, we love you. Now, day before yesterday, we were talking about Rosh Hashanah. And for those of you who observe Rosh Hashanah, we are so excited to have you here because this is the last day of your celebration. And so this is something that we want you to know, that when you celebrate your creation of man and women by God, whatever faith it is, we're now in the year 5171, I believe. Anyway, I could be wrong by a couple of hundred years, who knows? But I know it's been a long time that members of the Jewish faith have been celebrating creation, and we want to honor that, especially as they get ready for Yom Kippur, which is coming up next week. We might talk a little bit about it too. Whatever your faith, we want to celebrate it with you. Today, we are going to be hearing from the Reverend Sean Imler, and he is going to be talking about healing relationships through forgiveness and compassion. I don't know if any of you have ever had any relationships that didn't work out quite like you were hoping they would, and you still are resentful, angry, or just downright mad at the other person. Well, I want you to stay tuned and listen to Sean. He's an excellent speaker and has a very good topic today that we all need to share. And then next week, we're going to have our Reverend John Stutz, and she's going to be talking to, wait a minute, I'm going to read this, Exploring Past Lives, an explanation for the inexplicable. That sounds exciting too. Now, speaking of excitement, just right now excitement, we have birthdays coming up this week. One is our Dr. Jan Bravo in Oklahoma. She's celebrating another birthday. And another one is local, Patterson, and that's our Reverend Bree Piker is celebrating a birthday. And Corky, do we have any beads? Here's some beads. Okay, Jan, here you go. You either get the pink or the purple, because your birthday's next. And whatever, Bree, we'll just put them both together for you, because we might get a chance to give them to you, either personally or maybe by Zoom. Who knows? Because we want to celebrate who you are. Well, we started out with the news that were so positive, but now the news that has saddened all of our hearts. The hearing that our wonderful Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away yesterday. When I heard that, I don't know about you, but my heart just fell. She was one of those women who not only fought for women's rights, but equality. And she had been around for so long and had done so much in her life. And if you're not familiar with who she is or what she did, she's going to be on the news all this week. Please read up on her. What an amazing woman. And we all pray for her and know that the angels are waiting for her with open arms so that they can also praise her for all she has done here on this planet. Thank you again for joining us. And now we're going to be hearing a prayer from our Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Reverend Dr. Ayleen Augustine, and I'm home. And it's so wonderful to be back here. And at the same time, there is a lot of stuff that, I kind of need to have taken care of. The landlords are replacing the refrigerator, and that should be here tomorrow. And I am just so blessed to have a home to come back to. There's a lot of people who didn't. And it's interesting because, we have, there is like a bit of smoke damage, and the inspectors came in. It's safe for me to be here, even though right now we don't have water yet that's drinkable. But hopefully we'll have that by the beginning of next week. But I do have power and I do have internet. So this has just been such an interesting process. And again, I want to thank everybody who held me in prayer and held all of us up here on the mountain in prayer. And it is, we're getting things put back together. And there will be, the landlords are going to see about having professional cleaners who can come in and, just take care of any residue and any ash and things like that. So, yeah, but, well, I'm home. And I feel very, very grateful for that. And, I'm sorry if I'm not as dressy as I would normally be, but I'm in the process of having to wash all my clothing that was here because there is residue on that and there are fumes. So the next couple of days are going to involve a lot of laundry over at the laundromat. And it's okay. And I look at this process as something that really has allowed me to have a deeper connection and a deeper understanding about what it means to maybe be willing to give up everything you have, to be faced with starting over. And sometimes starting over can be very exciting, and sometimes it can be really scary and really hard. So please hold in prayer all those who are starting over. And if you're starting over, reach out for help if it's overwhelming. Know that you're not alone. And for those who are still fighting the fire, because the fire is still going on, and it is almost at full containment, but that doesn't mean that the fire is out. It just means that it's contained, and hopefully by sometime near the end of next week, the fire will be out, and this will officially be over. So until then, we just keep all our firefighters in such strong prayer and hope that they're all right and hope that they're well and balance be restored. So take a nice deep breath in. And as you exhale, whatever it is that's weighing on your body, your mind, or your spirit, just kind of let that fall into that little imaginary care basket next to you. Because in this moment and in this space, you don't need to hold on to it. Dear, blessed, and wonderful Creator, we thank you for this day and we thank you for our lives. We thank you for all that you give in each and every moment and with each and every breath. We thank you for the blessing of being with us as we go through difficult times and difficult moments. Creator, we ask your blessing on everyone who is going through a hard transition and change right now. And we also ask your blessing on all those who work to help that, whether they be the doctors and nurses or scientists or community leaders or firefighters and first responders, or even delivery people and store clerks and everybody who is out there trying to help people manage through this difficult time. Creator, for all of those who have transitioned, We ask that their process have been as gentle and without fear as possible. And for those who are left behind, may they be comforted knowing that their loved ones are with you. Creator, we thank you for always being with us through the hard times and through the good times. And know that we trust you. We trust that wherever you take us, that you will not abandon us there, that you will be with us the whole time, taking every step beside us. Creator, we thank you for loving us and for teaching us to love one another. And as these times, really test our faith, test our confidence, and even test our ability to feel safe, we know you're there saying, look, together we've got this. I'd never leave you alone in this. So Creator, we thank you. We thank you for helping us through these challenging times. We thank you for understanding that we're not always going to be at our best, but you love us anyway. We thank you for your compassion. We thank you for the faith that you have in us. And Creator, whatever it means to you, we hope you have a wonderful day. For all your creation to the next 7 generations and beyond. Aho mitak oyasin, ago, ago, ago. By earth, sea, and sky. Namaste, shalom, assalamu alaikum. Blessed be. Amen.
Hello. I have come here today to talk about healing relationships through compassion and forgiveness. My name is Sean Michael Imler, if you don't know me, and I do sermons on occasion here at CCL, and I'm glad that you could join us today. It's a big celebratory day today because it's the first day that we had some clean air here in Santa Clara County, and I have to tell you, it was pretty awesome because I actually spent the day outside today, and what a blessing. I'm so happy today. It's unbelievable. I just really, really appreciate clean air and being able to see the blue sky again, and I know that, it may not last for long. It may come back, all this smoke that we've had because we still have fires going, but today, I'm happy. I love this topic, and I have done a lot of forgiveness work, and I do a lot of ho'oponopono with people, but this is not going to be that today. In fact, this content is really inspired a lot by Colin Tipping, who had a project called Radical Forgiveness, and it's not exactly his program. It's a lot of my stuff that I've kind of woven into it. But there are some elements of it that I wanted to just recognize him for the work that he did. He's no longer alive, but he did some really, really powerful work that helped people step through a forgiveness process without the need for psychotherapy, and that's really the special part. I am going to walk you through a number of procedures. I'm going to give you a lot of information, and you'll have the recording here so that you can go back over this and use the tools and the process anytime that you feel like you need to come into forgiveness with somebody. Now, the first thing I need to discuss is relationships, because this is about healing relationships. There are a lot of ways in which we could use forgiveness, but I wanted to target this thing specifically. And to really be able to do that, I want to note that there are really 4 types of relationships that are going to come up for you most often, where forgiveness is going to be the tool that you'll want to use and compassion is going to be the gateway to making that happen. And those types of relationships are romantic relationships. That's the significant other, and it could be a marriage or just a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's in business, so you could be an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, and that's fine, and this will work for that process, as well as whether you are on a team of people, whether you run a team of people. So business is the other type of relationship that's really important, and we all are in some relationship with somebody in a business context. Another is friendships, which is self-explanatory, and the rest is family. So I want to talk about the types of things that happen in these 4 different types of relationships that are most common. And these are learning opportunities that we have in these relationships. But these are the types of things that will manifest in each of these types of relationships. Now, in a romantic relationship, I see that one of the biggest problems in those types of relationships is the erosion of camaraderie. Now, that sounds like it might be a team thing, but really, if you think about it, when we get into a relationship with somebody romantically and we decide that we actually want to have a deeper relationship with them, whether that's a committed relationship through marriage or just a bond that we share by moving in with each other, or just determining that we want to be in a monogamous relationship with this person, we do so because we feel like, in the same way that you would with a sports team, like you're with a team player. Like this is somebody that kind of has your vision. They have an outcome that they want to create with you, as opposed to solo. And the erosion happens when we start to realize that the other person is different than we thought that they were. And I hear this a lot. I do a lot of coaching and hypnotherapy and healing in my practice, and I get a lot of people that have a wall that they come up against where they realize that the person that they started their relationship with is not the same person that they're with now. So these are realities that become apparent over time, and this can manifest through things like arguments, feeling unheard or unsupported, wanting different outcomes because you're not having the same or carrying the same vision, other directions of focus and intent for the relationship. They can be running up against personal habits that you find really irritating and make it really difficult to live with this person. Then there's the friends that don't like your partner, which is kind of a tough one, especially if it's your best friend. The other type of relationship, which seems very similar to this, can be in family. And the difference with family and significant romantic relationships is that there's the family that you choose and the family that you're born with. And so in the family that you're born with, some of the biggest problems come from connections and people that have different agendas than yours. So each family member often cannot recognize the fundamental differences between themselves and the rest of the family members, and the needs that those other family members have, and that those needs are probably different than yours. And this causes a huge problem in how people see themselves within the family and what the family actually means to them. And when this connection is absent, it leads to feelings of competition, where you have one sibling, rivaling against another. It comes up in disassociation, where one person distances themselves from the rest of the family. It can come up in contempt, where you hold in a hostile position one of your siblings, or a cousin, or step parents. Often there's a lot of resentment involved because some people don't get their way. It happens a lot between parents and children. Sometimes there's just plain poor behavior and people act out. Sometimes there's erratic communication. Those are the screaming matches and obscenities and name calling. Often there's a bunch of selfishness. People, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like I'm only thinking about myself, but often that's what happens in relationships, is that one person turns to selfishness because their needs aren't being taken care of, and they realize that they have to take care of themselves. And so that leads to a distancing between people. And then another one is hoarding. You might have a brother or sister, or maybe even parents that hoarded things, hoarded items or hoarded food, tried to keep things to themselves because they were scared that they were going to run out of something. So the other type of relationship is business. And the biggest problems with business relationships that seem to arise, in my experience, seems to be around power and dominance. So a lot of people start out with a position that they've been hired for, or they have a position that they are inserting themselves into another group as with a particular set of skills, and then there are agreements that are made, and then over time people tend to not hold you in the same light or in the same position, either because they want dominance over you, or they themselves want to excel and they're using you as a stepping stone. And similar things to this may result in power struggles between people, one person wanting to get their way and another person feeling like they're not getting their way. Resentment, again, is a big one, which is maybe somebody gets a position that you wanted, or somebody's getting more attention, maybe because the girl Friday's more pretty. Another thing that happens often is a lack of follow-through. So you may have worked with people. I know that this happens to me. I'm like one of those kind of crazy workaholics, and sometimes you're with people that don't give as much attention to their work as you do, and that leads to resentment toward them for that. Sometimes there's just a plain dissatisfaction with a job because there can be a number of reasons. Maybe you're not making enough money. Maybe you're not getting the right hours that you want. Maybe you're not having people come through with things that they promised you. And maybe you're ending up working a lot more than you intended, so that you can either make ends meet, or that you can meet the requirements of the job, or the sometimes absurd timelines that they give you for projects. Another one is feelings of unworthiness, and I struggled pretty heavily with this one because I used to work with a lot of engineers, and sometimes you just work around people that are absolutely brilliant, and they seem to have all the answers, and they get all the attention, and then you kind of feel like, well, maybe I'm not as important. You're still holding some function that's important, but you're not going to be the superstar because somebody else is going to get that attention. And this leads to competition. So often people do absurd things or say absurd things because they feel unworthy, and then they try to compensate by other actions. There's also a feeling of being undervalued, and this happens a lot with, especially in the tech world here in Silicon Valley. It's like employees are kind of a dime a dozen. In fact, if you've been around too long and you're making too much money, they just want to replace you with somebody new and young that they don't have to pay very much money, and they can mold the way that they want. And so that leads to this feeling of being undervalued. And then there's a lack of productivity. That can happen just because you're being unsatisfied with the job. And so you don't have the same impetus that you did originally. The last one is friendships. So the biggest problem with friendships, and this is a generalization, but I see it as judgment and poor communication. So when there's a lack of communication, the friendship drifts apart. Like, people need to pick up the phone and need to talk to each other, or else you don't have the same connection that you might have. Now, there are those everlasting relationships where you can go a month or two without talking to somebody and still pick up right where you left off. And I'm lucky enough to have a couple of those relationships in my life, and I'm very, very blessed for that. But relationships do require some give and take. Like, the phone goes both ways, as they say. So the other thing is judgment, and I think this happens. It can happen a lot in family relationships, but when it happens with friends, my opinion is that people that judge you aren't really your friends as much as you would like them to be, because I kind of look at the deeper relationships that I have with some of my friends, and there is an unconditional love there. And so I hope that you're lucky enough to have a friend or two, or maybe even 10 like that, which would be fantastic, because that feeling of judgment has this sense about it that you're never living up to somebody's expectations. And that makes it really difficult to enjoy just being with somebody for the sake of who they are and the things that you guys share. And it can often lead to an erosion of trust. When somebody's judging you, you don't really trust that they really have your personal evolution, you being the best that you can be as their highest priority. They're more concerned with how they view themselves and whether you're living up to how they look. The other is safety. So you want to be able to feel safe with friends, and I know that this is a big deal for the younger generation nowadays, millennials and the next generation that's coming after them, which I think they call Generation Z or something like that. I think I've lost track. But that feeling of safety, like someone doesn't have your back. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a client recently, and she was telling me that she befriended this girl who she never thought liked her, and introduced her to her circle of friends. And then after about 3 months, the girl started spreading all these horrible rumors, and she never found out what the rumors were because nobody would tell her, but everybody basically ostracized her. And why people do that? It's just bizarre. But sometimes just people can be vindictive for some reason, and you don't know really what their motivations are. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So that feeling of safety is really important. You want to feel safe with your relationships, and if it gets eroded, you don't know who you can trust. And again, this other thing of camaraderie, like you want to be connected with your friends. You want to feel like you're, on the same page with them, and that can be eroded as well. The other things that can be eroded are connection with people, spontaneity. You can't really just kind of come out and be spontaneous with people because you kind of have to double check everything that you're saying and thinking and doing to make sure that you're living up to their expectations so that you don't cross the line and turn them against you. And the last thing is value. Like when you don't feel valued, or when you start devaluing the people that you're with, that can erode relationships pretty dramatically and sometimes irreparably. So as I went through those lists and the type of relationships that you might be in, and the things that I see as the commonalities on how those relationships erode, it's important to be able to have some mechanism, some tool that can help repair those relationships. And, I think that communication is really important, and being able to talk to people and work through these things is obviously a very important part of healing a relationship. But there are times where you can't really just come out and talk with somebody, especially before you do your own work around the situation. So the conflicts that arise, it's really important to do a couple of things. One is to recognize that this is a spiritual event that is taking place. And the other thing to recognize is that you can change it, but it starts inside of you, not necessarily with the other person. In fact, I believe that you don't even need to have any communication with the other person if you can do the healing inside of yourself. And I'll explain more about why that is later, but if any of you are familiar with the Ho'oponopono process, you know that the universe steps in as a proxy for you to assure that the request for forgiveness that you are making is heard, at least by the universe itself, and it steps in to heal the relationship, even if the other person is no longer walking alive on the planet, even if the other person is on the other side of the planet, even if you'll never see that person ever again. The universe steps in, or God steps in, whatever you want to call that spiritual force. I actually call it the creative force of the universe, the CFU. It steps in on your behalf and does the healing for you. But on another level, why do we have these relationships and conflicts in the first place? And this is really because we came here to heal our relationships. So nobody came to their own planet. We all came to the same planet together. And I always say that being human is a group effort, and we need to heal our relationships with one another, not just in this lifetime, actually, but we need to heal all of the ancestral relationships that have formed the human bodies that are inhabiting this planet at this time. We all carry with us a lot of ancestral baggage, and we're not going to get into ancestor stuff right now. We're just going to focus on what's simple and what I can get through in the next 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it is. But we did come here to learn lessons. We did come here to have conflict and to resolve that conflict. And it's really important to try and maintain a focus that is looking at this type of healing process as one that requires you to step into your objective self, the part of you that's able to look at your subjective experience, to look at all of the personality attributes that you have, to look at all the relationships that you have, to look at the person that you are, the beliefs that you have, the perceptions that you have of the world, your worldview itself, and step into that objective self and look at all of those things from outside, rather than trying to do it from within your perception, within your belief systems, looking through your own eyes. The problem with that is that we have a fixed set of belief systems, like the lenses that we look at the world through, and those don't really change all that often. So we have to make a practice out of stepping outside of ourselves and seeing ourselves objectively rather than subjectively. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, one of the things that we're also trying to do, though, is we're trying to address the shadow self. So that's the part of us that sits in a place of needing healing, the place that we have parts of ourselves that we're unwilling to accept. And sometimes we stuff those parts of ourselves. Sometimes they come out at times where we really don't want them to. And rather than try to push those parts of ourselves away, I suggest that we embrace those parts of ourselves. And the way to do that really is to embrace the people that are causing the most conflict in our lives. And this often, it comes about in this kind of victim-perpetrator mentality, which is I'm the victim of somebody that's hurt me, and they're the perpetrator. And what I would suggest that you recognize is that they're not just the perpetrator in the event that's created the victim. They're actually holding some part of your shadow self, that they are your mirror. And people like this, who are really troublesome, they tend to either mirror a part of ourselves that we've denied, mirror a part of ourselves that we project onto others, projection being part of yourself that you're unconscious about, but you project the personality of that onto somebody around you, and then you don't like them because they have this particular part of their personality, but it's really a part of yourself that's being projected onto them so that you can see it as your mirror. The other is a force that they give us this ability to look at the beliefs that we have. So they might be talking in a way or sharing something about themselves that you find contentious in some way, and they're really mirroring a belief system that you have about yourself, but it's masked and you can't look at it. And the last would be to keep us on track, simply so that we, once we're awakened to the fact that people are mirroring the unconscious parts of ourselves back to us, if you are aware of that, anytime that you come into disagreement with somebody, you can ask yourself, what part of myself do I not like that is sitting in the background hidden that I haven't been able to look at directly, but I can see it through this person in front of me? So I'm going to go through a couple of lists. The list is some opposite personality types or attributes. I call these the light side and the shadow side. And you might notice that something that you want to be also gets revealed to you through somebody else that's its opposite. So it might be refined, and the shadow side of that is nasty. The light side could be compliant, and the shadow side be rebellious. The light side friendly and unfriendly, quiet and noisy, reliable and undependable, responsible and unpredictable. Remember, think about these in terms of when you're seeing somebody outside of you mirroring some part of yourself back to you that you don't like, you can also have the opportunity to see what would be the opposite of that. And that is really indicating the lesson that you're trying to learn. So there's like giving and greedy. There's sensible and brash. Smart, dumb and stupid. So if you are hearing any of these attributes that you know of somebody that brings out some part that you don't like in their personality, it might be that you are trying to wrestle with how to bring out the light side of that. So if they're manipulative, You might be trying to be more cooperative. If they're a liar and a cheat, you're trying to be more honest. If they're mean and cruel, you're trying to be more nice, morose and funny, fearful and confident, crass and sensitive, uncaring and sociable, failure and successful, cowardly and brave, boring and fun, useless and talented, needy and self-reliant, rough and gentle. So keep track of those. If there was one that jumped out at you from somebody that you know, hold this in your mind, because when we go through the forgiveness process, you'll want to use that person as the model of how to step through this process for yourself. Now, the way out of all of this stuff, these victim-perpetrator relationships, these mirrored relationships of the shadow self back to you, giving you something that you're striving for because the soul's journey is trying to take you toward that. The way out is forgiveness and compassion. But there are some reasons why that it's this way. So to not forgive keeps you trapped in your own personal box of resentment. So anytime that you are holding any sort of resentment about the perpetration of something upon you, something that somebody's done that's made you the victim, when you don't resolve this but you just hold the hostility and resentment inside of yourself, the other person actually, other than the thought form that you're putting out there about how bad that person is, you're never resolving this, and you are essentially building a box that's lined with pictures and maybe even songs and sayings and arguments. You're lining your box with all of these old memories that are keeping you trapped and confined in the state of mind that you created when the first event happened that caused the conflict between you, or the continuing events that are happening. You are actually fixing and holding those things in place. And you've probably heard the saying, where your attention flows, energy goes, or where your attention goes, energy flows, however you want to talk about it. Wherever you are focusing your attention, you are reinvigorating all of those events, all those pictures on your walls of your box, all of those arguments that you have, or the feelings that you have inside. You are replaying them and keeping them fresh and alive. And wouldn't it be nice to just liberate yourself from them? And waiting for the other person to do something, you could wait forever. And is it really worth it to hold yourself in this position for eternity, and giving all of your power over to the other person to do something about it? And I say, take your power back. The only person that really hurts as a result of this is you. Often the perpetrator, whatever they're doing, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but whatever they're doing, they realize that they have done something to you, but they're not really connected to what it is that they've done. It's you that are feeling the hurt from it. So let it go. It's time. Don't hold on to it, because it doesn't do anybody any good. By keeping someone trapped in your idea of them prevents them from being more than they can be. So the more that you create thought forms, those are really thoughts that have so much energetic and emotional influence to them that they almost seem to be alive. And the more that you create those thought forms, the more that you stop that other person from actually ever being able to be different than what they are. And what they are is what created the event in the first place. And if you don't do something about it, they may continue just being the person that they've always been, and they will definitely continue to be the person they've always been if you cannot let go of the thought forms that you've been feeding energetically and emotionally with all of your resentment and hostility and anger and rage. And unfortunately, even though the person may have done something that is highly disagreeable to you, the truth is that humanity's been doing this to each other for thousands of years, and we're never really going to have the opportunity to evolve as a species if we cannot learn how to manage our emotions and learn how to move beyond these boxes of confinement that we put ourselves in from the events that have hurt us. The more forgiveness and compassion you have, the more freedom from pain that you experience and that everyone gets to experience. Imagine being able to take the lead weight off of your body, what you would be like if you weren't carrying around this hostility and resentment any longer, and your body just felt lighter. You felt more mobile. You felt more freedom, that you could share the better parts of yourself with everybody around you. And the truth is that that lead weight is like a suit of armor that's holding all of your resentment and your anger in place. And it's better to just shed yourself of that armor and allow yourself to let the more vibrant parts of yourself free. Let all that forgiveness and compassion become who you are. And when you have the embodiment of compassion, then everybody gets to benefit from who you are, but nobody's going to benefit from you when you're holding this suit of armor with all this pain inside. So we just don't want to stay the same. And the other person suffers just as you do. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more too, because that's a really important point. That is the way to actually arrive at compassion, which is recognizing that everybody suffers. And this is a very Buddhist concept, that we came to this life to suffer. That word, the word that they use that translates as suffering is actually the word dukkha, and it also means dissatisfaction. But let's look at it in the context of suffering, though. All of us suffer in some way. We've all lost friends or loved ones. We've all been hurt. Sometimes by our government, sometimes by our families, sometimes by our friends, sometimes by physical accidents. We've all felt suffering in some way. All of us have. Nobody gets to escape from suffering. So part of compassion is recognizing that the suffering in you is also the suffering that somebody else experiences. And it doesn't do any good to the concept of suffering to think that my suffering is deeper than your suffering, because really everybody feels suffering, and to everybody suffering hurts. And so a place that you might arrive at is recognizing that the suffering in you is just like the suffering in somebody else. And you, like I and everybody around us, we all have coping mechanisms and strategies to deal with our suffering. Some of us wear masks to pretend that we're not who we really are. And some of us we use our anger to get our way. Sometimes we hurt other people to get our way. Sometimes we do things unconsciously. We don't mean to, but it's just the skills that we developed maybe weren't the greatest skills because our parents didn't have the greatest skills to teach us how to deal with our suffering. And some people actually had the exact opposite. I think about people that have to grow up in orphanages, or people that lost their parents at a very young age and had to raise themselves, or people in countries that are war-torn. A lot of people have deep levels of suffering, and the strategies that they have to deal with the world sometimes are not really well developed, and they go around hurting themselves and others because they just don't know any better. And often the people that perpetrate the most violent crimes, or people that perpetrate the events that have led you to suffering, they've done so really because that's the best that they could do. If they had the tools to do better, they definitely would. But some people, they've never been taught that there's another way. There's another way to function. There's another. They have choices. People in really difficult environments with really difficult families that have drugs and prostitution associated with them, or lots of violence. They've never been taught that there's another way. And so sometimes those people are just putting out the best that they can be, and sometimes that best to somebody else who had those tools taught to them, it sucks. They're like, that's a terrible way to respond, but everybody's trying to survive, and everybody's trying to be the best that they can possibly be. But there's this ego self, and the ego self is suffering, and it's trying to survive, and it's doing the best that it can, and it thinks that it's making the right decisions, really because it has no other way to think about it. So a lot of those people that are committing the worst crimes, or a lot of those people that are hurting others, they just don't know any better. And so for you to be a compassionate human being is the opportunity to recognize that you have been given some tools, you've been given some awareness, and what would it be like if you could actually share that and utilize that tool to bring healing both for yourself and for others. So when somebody does something, whether that's a family member or somebody at work, when they do something that's just despicable, remember, they only did that because they didn't know any better. And sure, you could say, oh yeah, well, they had a lot to gain from it, but what does that really mean? Maybe they're gaining from it because they feel that they lack. Maybe they don't recognize that this is an abundant universe and that everything will be given to them if they just hold the right energy and attract that thing to them. And so they feel they have to scrape and fight for what they get and then take advantage of other people. Imagine being in that person's mind, and what would actually motivate them? Is it truly because they just need to feel superior, or is it because they truly feel incredibly inferior? So this is the opportunity that gives us the compassion within ourselves to try and turn these victim-perpetrator episodes around. Now, there's a setup to the process, and the setup, one is to recognize filters, and there's a really deep part that I could go into around filters, but for the sake of time, I just want to note one particular thing, which is that we cannot possibly take in through our five senses everything that's going on around us. We have to have filter systems put in place that only give us what we need to see immediately, so that we can manage the situation that we're in. If we were to take in everything that's going on around us with total clarity, the brain actually would not be able to handle it. It's just like a computer system. It has a certain amount of RAM and a large enough hard drive to take in a certain amount of information, and then it gets to be too much. So these filter systems are things that are put in place so that we can just deal with the immediate environment. The ego steps forward and it helps us process what needs to be processed so that we can have the right response to whatever is coming at us at any particular moment. And those filter systems are always at play. So just remember that you're only seeing part of the picture, right? You're seeing the picture that you have the clarity to be able to see, but there are things that you don't know and can't see. So always keep that in the back of the mind, that you don't know everything that's going on. The other is to be able to connect with the observer, which I talked about earlier. So that part of you that steps outside of yourself, and I kind of always go like this, because I always feel that it's right here behind me, but it sees my entire life. It sees all of the desires that I have, all of the belief systems that I've put in place about, who's good in the government and who's bad in the government, or the type of people that I like and the reason why I don't like those types of people, or what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. The observer sees those things. It sees them clearly for what they actually are, instead of my subjective reality, which is my worldview and what I'm capable of taking in through my filter system. That objective self is really, really important, because it is in contrast to the ego self that's really just concerned with your survival. It wants to make sure that everything's just in place in just the right way, and it can predict the future, and it doesn't like change, and it wants to be able to know that if you do this, you're going to be safe, and if you do that, that's going to be too much change, you're not going to be able to handle it. So this part of the objective self is the opposite of that, and it sees that whole thing with a level of clarity. That objective self, there are other names for it. You might call it the higher self, you might call it the superconscious, but it knows all about you without the filter system. And the other is the compassionate part of yourself. You need to bring that into this process. So everything that we talked about in regard to compassion and suffering, and understanding that your suffering is like the suffering that somebody else is experiencing. You also need to make the decision that life doesn't happen to you. Life happens for you. This whole thing that you experience as your life with your family and your friends and your work, this is all happening for you to have an experience. And when you step into that person, you're going to have a very different lens to look through than the person that life is happening to you. You're either making life happen, or you're letting life happen to you. And I want you to make life happen. I want you to realize that life happens for you, and you have a role in this. Another thing is that you're having this experience for the benefit, because when you understand what you're learning from the experience, you'll realize that this was the best way that your superconscious or soul could teach you this particular lesson that your soul needs to learn. the most difficult and challenging relationships that you have in your life are the greatest blessings. They are the best way that your superconscious or your soul could get you to learn that thing that you came to this lifetime to experience and to evolve with. And we can never change what happened in the past. We can only change our story and our perception of it. And that gives us a lot of power. So when you change the perception, the situation itself may change because you're not holding it in the same set of belief systems that you were holding it in before. Remember, I said that box that you've been hanging all those pictures on, you have all those old thoughts going on in your head and all those old memories of the arguments, etc., things that people said. If you were to take all those pictures down, if you were to turn up some good music, that box, it may not completely go away, but it's going to get bigger because you're allowing something different to come into it and push those walls out to give you another more substantial and interesting reality. And I want that for you. Bring in more reality, push that box out, make the walls bigger, maybe just even open the lid, let the sunlight in. So let's get to the process part. Now, the first thing is you need to tell your story. I can't even tell you how important this is. When you know, anything that you've been holding in, I'm thinking of a client right now. I don't even know if I want to tell you. I know I would never reveal her name, but her story, let me think about this for a moment. Let's just say, and if you're listening to this, you may have had a similar experience. But there are sometimes improprieties that happen with young girls and family members. Let's just say that, okay? A lot of women have been holding those stories in for years, maybe 20, 30, 40 years. And the process of telling that story, your voice, your fifth chakra, your energy, the will manifesting through your words is so powerful. And if that story has not been heard before, you need to tell it. It needs to come out of you. You can't keep it stored, pushed down, suppressed in your body, because the body is just going to get sick trying to hold that story in. You need to get it out. If you haven't told anybody, maybe you just need to write it out. And because it needs to be witnessed in some way. It's kind of like, it's like art. Like, you can create as much art as you want, but until somebody else sees that art, that process is not complete. It requires somebody else. Remember, being human is a group effort. We have to do this together. So there's something about using the voice and using your expression to get it out is important. But also, if you can even just write out that story, whatever that story is for you, that story needs to be heard. You need to release your victimhood so you can fully own what your story is. So this step is looking for somebody or getting a piece of paper where you can compassionately deliver your story to somebody who can compassionately hear it, or at least getting it written out on paper. And sometimes, you know, if we're not talking about something as impactful as a impropriety like that, but we're just talking about, you know, having a bad relationship with somebody at work, you know, writing that out is going to be good enough. The thing that you need to do is you need to really feel the feelings of it. This is step number 2. You need to really get into your authentic power and allow yourself to feel exactly how you feel in the vulnerability part of yourself. And you got to be willing to show up absolutely 1000% as a human being, not holding anything back. Because as the expression goes, you cannot heal what you don't feel. So you need to be able to access that. And when people access their pain, this is the beginning of their healing. So when we're combining steps 1 and 2, steps number 3 would be having this written out specifically from the victim's standpoint. Okay? It's not about sugarcoating anything. It's allowing yourself to feel exactly how you feel without any editing. And a lot of people do this. They're like, oh, I really feel this way, but I realize that person, they've been hurt and blah, blah, blah. Don't go there. Don't do it. I'm going to give you an example. my father, very, very difficult man. I had a very difficult relationship with him. He was an abusive alcoholic, and he's been gone almost 20 years, actually. And it took me a long time to do the forgiveness and healing around the things that happened in my relationship with him. And even when I thought that I'd gone all the way through the process, years afterward, out of nowhere, and I believe this is astrological, I was having some planetary transits at the time, and Mars stepped in, and it triggered something in relation to Saturn and my natal sun, and I suddenly started feeling all this animosity toward him again. And you know what? I did not filter it at all. If I was in a conversation with somebody and I started talking about my dad, I'm like, God, that ass. This is church. I'm not going to use any bad words, but that ass, I wanted to strangle him. I wanted to murder him. I really just didn't respect him and the things that he did, and I would say it. I had to get it out. It just needed to be heard. I needed to say it. And after about 6 months, it finally went away. And it was because I didn't edit it. I was real with it. I remember feeling during the time like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to be able to love him again? And I could. I could. That 6 months or so, it went by, and then I got back to moving through the forgiveness process with him, and I was done again. Now, it may come up again. I don't know. I'm only 51 years old. It might come up. I don't know when, and that's okay. But I'm real with it. I felt like a victim. I stepped into my victimhood, and I let it be heard in the way that it was totally authentic for me to say it. And it felt really good. And did I hold on to it? No. It went away. So, and I say this because my dad had a really, really bad childhood. And I realize that there are lots of people that have really bad childhoods, but there was some stuff in his childhood that, for me, like, it just caps it. I would run his experiences up against anybody. Not that I'm trying to be competitive, but it was really bad. And so it made it that much more difficult for me to go, oh, how could I hold him in such a poor light? Poor him, and no, don't go there. It doesn't matter what that person experienced. It matters what you experienced. Feel yourself authentically. Be real with yourself, and just allow yourself to feel the feelings that you have, because they're going to go away once you express them. So what we do then, step number 4, is we collapse the story. So this is where we make conscious the choice to withdraw the energy that we've given to the story, and begin to realize that the story is mostly our interpretation of events based on our limited perception of reality. And that since there is more to it than meets the eye, it is largely an illusion. Okay? The way that you see the world, I guarantee, is not matched by any other person. Even though there's nearly 8 billion people on the planet, there's nobody just like you. You are exceptionally unique. And because of that, you have a perception and a worldview that is different than the person that did that awful thing to you. And so, because there are two realities that are coming up against each other, which one is right? Which one is true? And I would say both of them are true, and neither one of them are true. If you can step into that and recognize that whatever it is that you are experiencing is part of your shadow self, the part of the unconscious that may have belief systems or perceptions or behaviors that you developed early on as a child, and they're projecting themselves out onto the mirrors or people around you and being fed back to you, something in what somebody did to you is a part of yourself that is either looking for soul's evolutionary opportunity to heal and grow, or it's the shadow self trying to tell you there's something in you that needs to change. It's screaming for you to listen to it. So collapse the story. So now, write another letter from the victim's standpoint, but this time you can have more humility and compassion. What would your victim self feel when it was coming from the place of compassion? I recognize that the suffering in me is just like the suffering in you, and you did what you did because your ability to deal with the world sucks, and you're doing the best that you can, and you're wearing some inauthentic mask and trying to get what you can out of the world and hurting other people. And what is that story? Write out that story. Write it from the point of view of the compassionate self that recognizes that the suffering in them is just like the suffering in you. And here we can have the opportunity to reframe the story. This is step number 5. So we replace the illusionary story with a new story, and that is the compassionate story. And this one expresses our willingness to see that what appeared to have happened, far from being a tragedy, was in fact exactly what we wanted to experience for our soul's growth, and was in that sense absolutely perfect. So this reframed story is the same story that the objective self would write, the superconscious or higher self, whatever you want to call it, that part of you that sees your life from a bird's eye view. It knows all the reasons why you do the things that you do and why you've attracted all these particular people into your life. Write it from that point of view. This is a whole new story. So when you write that from the spiritual point of view, it's the story and the lesson that you chose to learn from this situation. It's what happened for you, not what happened to you. What happened for you? And then step 6 is to integrate. And it's necessary to integrate these things at a cellular level. And the way to do that, I'll give you some really simple ways to do this, because we're not going to be able to do that here, because we would actually need a much longer amount of time to really go deep into this together. But consider doing some breath work. Find somebody that may be able to do some breath work with you to help you integrate. You can walk. I like to do a really nice walking meditation, and it's an 8-step walking meditation where you count to 8 on the exhale, walking 8 steps through the exhale, and each time you're letting your energy flow down into the earth, and then 8 steps, breathing in and inhaling the earth back into you, and just imagine that you are integrating with planet Earth while you're walking, and Mother Earth is there to support you. And that's a really great way to integrate something like this. Another would be drawing. If you're artistic, even if you're not artistic, you can just pick up a pen, you can use some paints, you can just use a pencil, just start drawing out your integration process, whatever it looks like. Unfiltered, unedited, draw off the edges. It doesn't matter. You can make a mandala. If you like to do designs, you can go out in nature and you can find some sticks and some flowers and make a nice pattern out of them on the ground, and imagine that you're breathing life into that by sending all of the things that you may have held as resentments from that person out into the mandala while you're creating it, and then breathing in new life from the mandala as you're doing that. Those are some ways that you can integrate this experience. Sometimes you might even just go hug a tree. So, and if you actually ever need somebody to go through a deeper process with, I'm always available. And you can find me at bluebearhealing.com. And I think I'm going to leave this there. I hope that this has been a really good and powerful process for you. And I also want to thank Corky and Dottie for everything they do. I love both of you. And thank you everybody else for coming and joining me today. And I hope that you got a good tool out of this process, and you'll always be able to come back and watch this video anytime that you want to go over these steps again. So thank you very much. Love you all, and peace.
We step on the sacred shore. We are holding back no more. We are all we before, journeying the wisdom way. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up today. Reach into the deepest well, ring the clearest, sweetest bell, hold the truth inside your hand, know that you can make a stand. Rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up today. Bridging our pain home, knowing we are not alone. We are through with casting stones, we clearly meet the day. Rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up today. We can meet each other with open hearts and minds. We can bring to each wound forgiveness real and kind. Rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up, rise up, ooh, rise up today. Where am I? Right here. Where are we? Forever near. And the world's greatest fear is healing in our life. Rise up, rise up. Ooh, rise up, rise up. Ooh, rise up, rise up. Ooh, rise up
joining us for this celebration of faith and fellowship. We'll be back next Sunday. And for those of you, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can leave them in the comments section. If you appreciate this video and the work that the Center for Creative Living is doing, please press like on the video. You can share the video, and also please subscribe, because that will help this community and the church grow. Remember, in these difficult and challenging times, the opportunity to give and support an organization that has done so much for the community is tremendously important. Please help the Center for Creative Living continue in the wonderful work that it does. We will make it through this. We will be stronger for it. Our faith will carry us. Be blessed, be safe, and have a wonderful week.